So we have one of our dervishes is not here tonight and wasn't here today. It's our other Nadia, Nadia Anwar. Yeah. And this Nadia, she was here, maybe it was last meeting or the meeting before. Do you remember what she said? Mm-hmm. What did she say?
She heard some name when she was zikring.
Yeah, so you see sometimes when people are doing their spiritual practice, something unusual will happen. And in her case, it was a little bit more complicated because she saw in front of her a vessel and she heard the sound of a name that she should repeat. And what was the name she was hearing? Hassan. You see, Hassan. And she came and she asked me, I said, oh, this is very beautiful. Hassan means beautiful, means of good character, because in Arabic and in Persian and in other languages there's this word, it can mean, and it usually means beauty either inside of a person or the external aspect of a person or both. And even in English we say, for example, the word fair. Fair in English means either beautiful or equitable. You see? Just. See, it can mean both. The fair maiden. We use it less these days than we used to use it to mean beautiful, but it used to be used more often. And so what I wanted to do, because I thought about how wonderful, what a wonderful gift for that particular experience that she had had. So she was doing the zikr, the meditation, and she hears inside of herself this name, Hassan. The root, as I said to you, how is it spelled? And you told me that it is the same spelling as Husn, isn't that right? And Husn is found so many times in Quran. So what I wanted to do is explore with you something very valuable. And maybe we could say that this is really about coming to your senses. Because we say in English, if only I had come to my senses. If only he or she had come to their senses. And what do we mean by that when we say that?
To have reason.
To what?
Have reason.
To have reason.
Use your reason, quality, reason, and come to your senses, and you're going to reason things out, you're going to see things as...
So, what else?
Seeing things clearly.
Seeing things clearly. Is that right? Seeing things clearly, coming to your senses.
Being conscious.
Being conscious. See, being conscious of something, coming to your senses.
Seeing clearly after a period of confusion.
Seeing things clearly after a period of confusion, because that's usually how we do use it, isn't it? This person finally came to their senses, right? Or I finally came to my senses. We usually don't say that out of pride, but you know, that's really the truth of the matter. Now, I like that expression a lot because Rumi, our teacher, the teacher of the Sufi way is Rumi, one of them. And he says that we have different kinds of senses. And he says that 5 of our senses are made of copper, and 5 of them are made of gold. And regarding the senses, don't forget that most of the time he agrees with the philosophers, he agrees with the religious view that the senses could deceive us, they could mislead us. And And very often that does happen. So surely it cannot be those senses. The senses you were talking about would be the intellectual faculties, wouldn't they be? Or some kind of, as Deba pointed out, reasoning or clarity or whatever, you see, or Rahaf John said reasoning and so forth. Huh? But for Rumi, it's a different question altogether, because he regards the five senses that are copper to be the normal five senses that we think of, and in addition to that, they spill over a bit into the internal senses, you see, like the imagination and thought and so forth. And those that are made out of gold, he gives us a clue to his understanding. He says the word in Arabic is hes, for the sense. So he says, on hesi ke haq bar on hes muzhar ast, nist hesi in jahan on digar ast. So I have quoted this to you with some regularity. He says, that sense by which the haq is known, or that sense which becomes a place of manifestation for the haq, meaning true reality, is not a sense from this world, but a sense from the other world. Okay? So this is the meaning of that. And so right there, we get the sense of what he means is that some of our senses actually will allow us to know reality, and some of our senses will block us from knowing reality. You follow me? So, because normally when you're speaking of spirituality, there's the idea that you would only know reality by transcending the senses. And the differentiation I'm trying to make for you is that Rumi is saying you cannot know absolute reality in any case, but you can know reality. You can know reality through the divine names. You cannot know the essence of God. Nobody can know the essence of God, you see? So we want to understand that just as we cannot know the essence of God, we need a model to work with. And one of the main models used in Sufism is called beauty. So, and you will see some resonance with Heidegger and other existentialists in this discussion. So the notion is that God is beautiful. That's the first point. How do we know God is beautiful in the Quran?
He says.
God is beautiful and He loves beauty.
Okay, so we have the hadith. Huh? Inna Allaha jamilun yuhibbul jamal. Huh? God is beautiful. And of course it follows that He loves beauty. Isn't that true? So this is a hadith, isn't that right? What about in Quran itself? Because what interested me about Najia Anwar, was she said about, because she quoted to me, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. Do you know this verse? Huh? See? فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. What does it mean? And in English, what does it mean?
It is, that name is blessed because it created blessed.
So you see, when he says, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ, blessed be Allah, the most beautiful of the one who creates, the most beautiful of creators. So this is a place in the Quran that not myself, but all of the early Sufis, they go back to the hadith that you invoked, God is beautiful and therefore loves beauty. And this verse in Quran especially, because the Quran is regarded as having more weight, you see? So again, I was so surprised because I wasn't expecting to not hear something from Nadia Anwar, but I was very happy to hear what she said, because she said she told me elements that were more like in a dream involving a vision, but the verbal part she explained to all of you. She heard the word Hassan. She came in the zikr, she was reciting Hassan on her own. Am I right? That's what happened. So in other words, she was taken over by this divine name. And she came and sat here and she was telling me this. I said, Naja, this is a very good thing, because what you heard is a name. And then I say, Fatabarak, and she says, Alohu, Ahsanul Khaliqin. She immediately quotes, and I say, oh, you know. She says, yes, my father taught me this. Her father was Sufi, and he was a friend of Ustad's. So you see, so there's this one very significant. So who uses this? Ruzbahan. These are the early Sufis whose fundamental teaching is that you have very little hope to know God. But if you would like to know God, you need a path, and the best of all paths is love, and love is dependent upon beauty. You see? So this is the nature of the path. And the beauty is from this root, husn, and it means internal beauty and external beauty. Let's start with external beauty, since it's more obvious. So Rumi says, Khubruyan aine khubi u. Khubruyan aine khubi u. Ishq ishan akse matlubi u. So Rumi says, the beautiful ones, the ones with beautiful appearance, they are the mirror of his beauty. The love that you feel for them is the reflection of God's desirability, of his desirability. See, so you feel desire because actually you're desiring his beauty. So have you heard this before? Khubruyan aine khubi u, ishq ishan matlubi, akse matlubi u. So very beautiful. And this is, in Islam, nothing is shameful here. There's a very interesting thing, because in Islam, what is shameful is the act, but not the passion or the observation. See, so when you read old Muslim books, they only become weird in the 20th century or the late 19th century when they've been affected by European thought. But when you read anything up to the 17th, 18th century, you see a great deal of frank appreciation for both beauty and sensuality, but it is restricted, obviously, in the context of marriage or in the context of being betrothed to someone, you see? So it is restricted. However, the expression of it is not restricted. So you see a great deal of poetry of all kinds and a great deal of literature that's about the appreciation of beauty. So, well, what about the human being? So we have Allah is beautiful. We know He is beautiful because Inna Allaha Jamilun Yuhibbul Jamal. Surely God is beautiful and He loves beauty. We have Fatabarakallahu Ahsanul Khaliqin. Blessed be Allah, the most beautiful of creators. And because He is the most beautiful specifically of creators, it follows that whatever He creates is beautiful, even if you can't appreciate it. Meaning you might think it's ugly. So how did the early Sufis deal with this issue? Ruzbahan, for example, and other early Sufis, they said everything God has created is beautiful, but it is only ugly to the extent that it conceals God's manifestation. You follow me? So in other words, there may be a limitation in the surface receiving that beauty. See, this is how they're thinking about it. And even then, it is still beautiful in its own way. But to the extent, I'm telling you how they thought about this question. In other Sufis, like Ibn Arabi, who come much later, they said, no, actually, everything is beautiful. There's not, you don't need to add a condition to that. Since he is the most beautiful of creators, therefore everything he has created is in its own way, it is beautiful. And then, as I said to you, now we come to the idea of the human being, and we have this statement of Rumi's, Khubruyan, Aine Khubi Ust, Ishq Ishan, Akse Matlubi Usta. The beautiful ones, the ones of beautiful appearance, they are the mirror of his beauty, God's beauty. And the love that you feel for them is the reflection of God's desirability. So this is where we are in this conversation. Where do we hear in Quran about the beauty of man, of human being?
Yusuf?
In Yusuf, absolutely, we hear about it in broad terms, in many different terms, but specifically using this language, we hear about it in Surah Tin. What does God say in Surah Tin? قَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. We have created the human being. So here he says, not talking masculine, feminine, he's talking about the human being. We have created the human being on the most beautiful of statures, the most beautiful of forms. We created the human being. So the thing to understand about the school of love is it's entirely based on the school of beauty. And the reason I'm bringing this up with you tonight is I want you to come to your senses. And the way to come to your senses is to understand the kind of leap that Rumi is asking you to make. If you would like to know God, it's like trying to know air. And God says, I put plenty of beauty out there so that you would see my beauty. So in this sense, it's sort of a Platonic teaching, isn't it? It reminds us of the teaching of the Symposium to some extent. So you have this idea that, how will I reach God? Everybody's saying, how will I reach God? Well, even if you're a teenager running on hormones, you are eligible to learn about God because you are just so into the human form, and we adults can behave like teenagers sometimes, can we not? So the thing is that the human being, remember in the Sufi way, they're making no judgment about passion, feeling, desire. They are only, like in Islam, they are restricting the context of it. And once in a while somebody breaks the rules, like Zulaykha breaks the rules. She has the power, so she tries to break the rules. But in most cases, it's understood that you are allowed to participate in this, in your imagination is free. What is not free is your behavior in this world. So it's much more restricted. Now, where I come from in Tahiti, you are not restricted, you see, in either domain. But in the Islamic tradition, there's restriction. Isn't that true? So there's restriction, what you can do, what you cannot do. And so imagine a person wants to know God and they say, well, no, I don't know. I try to do everything I can. I'm fasting. You say, why don't you go enjoy beauty, the Sufis say. See, why don't you go and find something beautiful? And it's going to be more beautiful if you could see the beauty within. Because this word husn, doesn't it have more to do with ethics and character? Am I not correct? Because doesn't Islam have 3 fundamental principles along these lines? What are they?
Ihsan.
I'm sorry?
Ihsan.
Ihsan, but there's Islam, Iman, Ihsan, huh? And how do we know about these 3? What do we find out about them from Hadith in this case? What do we know? What's the story?
Gabriel came to the Prophet, peace be upon him.
Yes.
In the form of a man.
Yes, so what we know is that a very remarkable thing, like normally human beings, they wouldn't see Gabriel, would they? They would not see him. They once in a while, it's possible, we will read about cases in the Old Testament, I mean the Jewish scripture, the Torah and so forth, and the Christian scripture. But in most cases, we know that Gabriel is an angel, and it's very unlikely that the average person would see him. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was seeing him sometimes, and other times was not seeing him. Sometimes he was just receiving the revelation, but sometimes he was seeing him. But in this instance, the companions, some of the companions, they see a man, a young man, very beautiful man.
Clean clothes.
In what?
Very clean clothes.
White clothes, white, beautiful clothes, but a person who is radiant, who is very beautiful, must be, because in the way Ruzbahan and other teachers thought about it, which we wouldn't agree today, very often that beauty would go from outside to inside. See, the best case scenario, let's put it that way. Person would be externally beautiful and internally beautiful. I think we are more cynical about that, aren't we? We would say, well, person might be internally beautiful, but maybe not necessarily externally beautiful, or vice versa. Would you agree? So, but in this time, they believe the beauty begets beauty, and that external beauty infers that there's some internal beauty. And so, for example, in this tradition, this account, Gabriel, dressed as a beautiful man in white clothes, approaches Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and they see them talking, but they don't know who it is or what's going on. And then he leaves, and the companions, they say to the Prophet Muhammad, who was this? And he says, you have just seen Gabriel, and he was asking me about 3 things, which was Islam, Iman, Ihsan. Huh? And regarding Ihsan, what was he told? What did the Prophet tell to them about what was said to him?
Worship God the way you see God.
Worship God as though you see him. Correct? Ant abudullaha kanaka tarahu. See, worship God as if you see him, as if you see him. And the Sufis, they say that actually it's possible to see God, depending on his manifestation in the world of forms. So, the thing to understand is the Sufis in their poetry. Our teacher, for example, talks about drinking wine and sitting around with a beautiful saki, meaning a beautiful wine pour, huh? Does that what he means is going on, or what does he mean? Does he mean there's like some young, beautiful person there, or does... He means God. See, so the Sufis have, since that time, they've taken the symbol of beauty and they are now using it to mean something harder to explain to people, which is a theophany. Meaning, what are you going to say to people who haven't experienced, they have not experienced the great luminosity, the brilliant light, the flashes of lightning, the waves of love. They have not experienced this. The Sufis will say the same thing to the general public that God has said. Look for beauty in this person, the wine pourer, Saki. You see what I'm saying? Because the Sufis say, we have the same problem that you cannot understand because you haven't experienced this. So we will use a symbol that you can understand. And so if you, so the practical idea here that you would use is you would say, well, I have seen beauty somewhere. I have seen it externally on a person, or I know a person of great beauty internally, you see? And beauty is, according to Ruzbahan, to Ahmad Ghazali, this is the source of love. That love happens because of beauty, some kind of beauty. And it could be a mixture, it could be the internal aspect of the person, you see. Now, the reason I bring this up in the context of beauty is because, again, we're trying to ponder and consider the value to us of beauty in our daily life, is what I'm saying to you. Because people say to me, well, I don't seem to be making progress, or I don't understand what you're talking about, or you're talking about ecstasy and pleasure and so on and so forth. And I'm saying that if you are in the world of spirituality, you should actually be a connoisseur of beauty. You can't help it. Many of you have told me that after zikr, you go outside and you see that things are more luminous. Am I right? Many of you have seen epiphanies, God's manifestation in your own heart. And so, would you describe these as beautiful or ugly? They're always very, very beautiful, you see. And what happens is you become more experienced with beauty. And you start to see it everywhere. You start to understand better that this is a path. The path of following beauty is the path of Sufism. And we're trying to look also about not to create some kind of barrier between the world of the physical things and the world of emotional things and the world of the spiritual world. You see, we're trying to see that they are linked in this way, as Rumi points out. And isn't there a verse in the Quran also about whether it's possible? There's a verse in Quran that refers to all bashar. So what does bashar mean? It means a human being. So it means the mortal human, means the part of the human being that is perishable, that will die. We would say the mortal soul in English, but in Persian Arabic it has the idea of this person who is in Nasut. Nasut is this lower domain that we live in. And in this person there is a self. A self means there's an identity of some kind. There's spirit. We experience that we can experience spirit, we can experience the self, we can experience the heart, because the heart is what would have introduced us to spirit. So the heart would be kind of a faculty of consciousness and perception. So in this regard, in the Quran, God makes the invitation more universal, because he says, وَمَا كَانَ لِبَشَّرٍ أَنْ يُكَلِّمَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَّا وَحْيًا أَوْ مِنْ وَرَاءِ حِجَابٍ أَوْ يُرْسِلَ رَسُولًا فَيُوحِيَ بِإِذْنِهِ مَا يَشَاءُ. Have you heard this verse? He says, it is not given for a mortal that God should speak to him or her except through revelation. Revelation. Or from behind the curtains of the unseen, from behind the veil. Or through a prophet, because you can speak through a prophet, just open the prophetic revelation. A prophet who has been given the revelation and his permission to deliver this message, okay? وَمَا كَانَ لِبَشَرٍ أَنْ يُكَلِّمَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَّا وَحْيًا أَوْ مِنْ وَرَاءِ حِجَابٍ أو يرسل رسولا فيوحي بإذنه ما يشاء. إنه علي حكيم. God is most high and most wise. So there's at the end of these, very often you get a name, a divine name or two. So here we see that he is high beyond comprehension, but at the same time he is wise. So the indication is that there's great wisdom, and that this is a verse, like some of the other verse, that is at the boundary of the essence and the names, you could say. But it's a very important verse. Now, if you go talk to the mullahs, they will say this is just for the prophet. But that's not what God is saying. He's saying bashar. He doesn't specify which bashar, meaning which mortal. He just says it's not given, meaning it's not possible. Isn't that what it just said in here? It is not possible except through revelation. Wahi. Isn't wahi what Prophet Muhammad says he gets? Now, no, don't make a mistake. The Sufis are not saying at all that the spiritual person has become a prophet. They are never saying that. Okay? They are saying, however, that some of the things that come to prophets that are not about a new law or a new religion, some of the same spiritual blessings can come to people, to human beings. And he uses the word bashar on purpose because he's saying earth people, dirt people. You see, bashar means the people who came, like Adam, who were made out of dirt. They can experience God. Well, they should. I told you, he says, قَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. God says, I created them. I created them. We know he created them from dirt, he says, just like in the Bible. He says, I already have created them in the most beautiful stature, in the most beautiful form. The human being, he says. So he means internally and externally, he says. And the Sufis, they say, I mean, if we had hours, I could read you from Shabastari. If you look in my translation, he says, somebody says, or Shabastari is repeating some question like, well, then what is lust? He says, what is lust? Shahawat. And he says, shahawat is a natural outcome of the beauty, meaning lust is a manifestation in this world of this beauty, and the reaction that you have would, obviously a modern biologist may not agree with this assessment, but from the Sufi point of view, all of this beauty is interrelated. And so the attraction would again not be forbidden in Islam to talk about it, to mention it, but however it is usually guided in the form of the Sharia, which means in a marriage or some kind of relationship like this. So, but intact, the language is very frank, much more frank than Europeans' language of the same period. So when the Europeans were reading the books of the Arabs and the Persians in the 17th and 18th century, they were shocked about the language because they thought this was very open, risque kind of language like you might have today. But it was all said in a very frank way, very honest way. But again, it was very regulated in terms of its actualization, you see. So, okay, so where I want to go from here is to a poem of Rumi, because I started this morning with a poem that is a very beautiful poem. If you ever feel like you are in hell, for example, or that we tend to live in a sort of dark place, Rumi says, دوزخ است آن خانقان به روزن است اصل دین ای بنده روزن کردن است. Okay? دوزخ است آن خانقان به روزن است اصل دین ای بنده روزن کردن است. Shisha. So he says hell is that house that has no windows. The fundamental principle of religion and spiritualities is to put windows in to the house. So I deliberately said this line this morning because there's a related poem that I love very much. To be honest with you, I was thinking, what should I bring to you today? And this poem, it kept coming to me. I couldn't escape it because I had other things I was going to read to you, and then I kept this poem. I've always loved this poem. I've read it to you before in the past. You'll see. Some of you will see. But I just think this is one of the most beautiful poems. Here we go. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the English first, then the Persian, then the English again, okay? Because then you get to understand right away, okay? This is from Book 6, verse 3091 to 3098. The light from Joseph's face spilled through the lattices of the mansions as he passed by. Inside their homes, the dwellers were speaking. Joseph, traveling, is passing us over on this side. Seeing rays of light brightening the walls, the residents understood the significance. Any house with an opening on that side will be honored when that Joseph passes by. Hey, open a window in Joseph's direction, and through that slit you will expand in joy. Love's labor is in making a window there, since hearts are brightened by the friend's beauty. Then forever see the beauty of the one you love. It's really in your hands, dear familiar friend. For your sake, open the way to what lives within. Push away other considerations from your mind. What do you think? Isn't that lovely? And you see the connection to the other poem this morning. So the language is more or less the same in Persian, but with some minor changes in translation without losing the truth of the poem. So he says, Nure ruye Yusufi waqt ubur mi fetadi dar شباک هر قصور پس بگفتندی درون خانه در یوسف است این سو و سیران و گذر زان که بر دیوار دیدندی شعا فهم کردندی پس اصحاب بقا یعنی بقا یعنی امارت یعنی جمع بقعت فهم کردندی پس اصحاب بقا خانه ای را کش دریچه است آن طرف دارد از سیران آن یوسف شرف هین دریچه سوی یوسف باز کن و از شکافش فرجعی آغاز کن عشق ورزی آن دریچه کردن است که از جمال دوست سینه روشن است پس هماره روی معشوقه نگر این به دست توست بشنو ای پدر راه کن در اندرونهای خیش را دور کن ادراک غیر اندیشه را. So one of the beautiful lines in here, he says, was shekafesh furja'i agaz kon. So the two words, they mean the slit or the crack. And furja means not only the idea of happiness, but it means the idea of opening. So there's two words for opening, but one of them also means happiness. Huh? So the language, it's a little bit of unusual Persian, but it's very beautiful. And it's already on our website, this poem. So if you go to 2011 archives and you go to April, you will see the Persian. I'm changing the English a little bit right now to make it sweeter, better actually. So I will change that. But the Persian is already on our website. Huh? April 2011, Dari. Okay. So again, this beautiful poem. The light from Joseph's face spilled through the lattices of the mansions as he passed by. Inside their homes, the dwellers were speaking. Traveling Joseph is passing us over on this side. Seeing rays of light brightening the walls, the residents grasped their significance. Any house with an opening on that side will be honored when that Joseph passes by. Hey, open a window in Joseph's direction, and through that slit you'll expand in joy. Love's labor is in making a window there, since hearts are brightened by the friend's beauty. Then forever see the beauty of the one you love. It's really in your hands, dear beloved familiar one. For your sake, open the way to what lives within. Push aside other considerations from your thought. So you have to imagine what's going on here. There's the normal highway, the main street. The mansions, of course, they're facing the main street, but that's not the way Joseph is traveling. They said he's the other side of the house. You have to make a window on the other side of the house. It's understood you have plenty of doors and windows on this side. You see what I'm saying? Because the language is very specific. You have to try to visualize what Rumi is saying. Is most of my life, I live in a house. Remember this like this morning, the notion of the self. In this case, it's a multi-leveled mansion. And on the other side, whoever has bothered to put in a window, they would usually have lattices there for privacy and for allowing the breeze to come through. And the breeze might carry a fragrance, might it not? Like a perfume. Like Joseph's fragrance, for example, like in the Quran. But in any case, what Rumi wants you to imagine is what would have actually existed at that time, is that there are houses. They have courtyards, but they're facing the main avenue. And everything you know is happening from that side. And he says that's not the way Joseph is walking. Joseph is walking on the back alley. He's walking the other way. And you will know because you will see the light shining. This is totally related to your actual spiritual experience, huh? Agreed? It's perfectly fine to be on the main avenue. You may actually see some beauty, some person who is beautiful, but they cannot match the beauty of Joseph, you see? So they are borrowing. And this beauty, is it not eternal? Like when we say Joseph, who does he mean by Joseph? I'm sorry? He means God, huh? And it's not a surprise because the abjad for Joseph is 156. You see? So 156 is qayyum. He's the everlasting, resplendent one, you see? So you can do the math yourself and you will see. So Joseph is a code word for God, for the everlasting one. And so in the self-sustaining, self-sustaining everlasting, so the 156, Yusuf. And so whenever we hear these stories about Joseph, we have to understand he means God. And so the beauty belongs to God. And that's why I say he's passing on a different place. This is actually like if it was inside of you, you would say that it's more of an up and down situation. So let's have it rather that we're lying down. So we're lying down on the couch and our head is facing the street, see? So we're in our head, we're in our usual ideas about things, but over on the other side, which is where our heart is where Joseph is going to pass by, you see? So you have to try to visualize what Rumi is trying to say. Is it clear? So this is a very interesting teaching, and those who say they cannot know God, they already know God, but they just don't know it. You see? They don't grasp that they already know God, because they're seeing God every day, constantly, and they don't understand what they're seeing. If they made a window from their heart, they would immediately understand that this was Joseph who was passing by. You see? So again, you should make a window. What is the window? To make a window, you need some saws and some chisels. Like usually it's probably a cement or mud. So you need a chisel, and you're going to hit it, Allo. You're going to hit you're going to make the window, okay, with zikr, and then it will open, and you will see, you will be happy. It's not good to be old and to be unhappy. It's better to be old and to be happy. The way to be old and to be happy is that you see the beauty of things. And so this brings joy to you and happiness to you, you see?